take a good look at each other so that we don't miss each other too much in the weeks ahead.
Sounds kind of fatal.
No. It's not fatal at all. It's about the realities. It's about the realities. So I'd like to do roll call, and then I have a few comments to make before we start right into the meeting. So I'll turn to Madam Clerk for roll call.
Mayor Bernadette Clément,
Présente.
Councillors Claude McIntosh, Elaine McDonald,
Present?
Sid Gardner,
Here.
Caroline Hébert,
Présente.
Councillors Maurice Dupel,
Present.
Glenn Grant,
Present.
Justin Towndell,
Present.
and I believe we have, oh, my apologies,
This guy.
Councillor Todd Bennett,
I'm here.
and we have one attendance electronically.
We do. Councillor Bergeron? Welcome, everybody. I'd like to start by acknowledging that we are gathering on the traditional territory of the Mohawk people of Akwesasne. So before we start, I'd just like to go over a few changes. So last time we met was actually this week, Monday. Feels like it was a month ago. So the landscape has changed considerably since that time. We had a provincial declaration of emergency, at which time Premier Ford made some changes that had great impact on our community and the province. So we heard about the gatherings of no more than 50. We heard about the closure of bars and restaurants in terms of dine-in as opposed to take-out. So we have been adjusting to that locally here, and the police have been adjusting as well to understanding their powers under that new legislation and how to enforce those things. Residents and small business are trying to adjust as we speak and are in all kinds of networking situations to help each other out. Community response has been remarkable from that point of view in terms of people trying to figure things out and coming together electronically to do so. From a federal government perspective, so we heard the Prime Minister say three very important things, and he said it every day since. Stay home as much as possible, buy only what you need, and stay connected with your neighbors, check in on your neighbors. After that time, he also announced a rather large package in terms of assistance for folks, and we're still working through what that means for people locally. I know that there are people looking at that as we speak as well. There was a border closing, so we are a border town, and that has an impact, particularly for our neighbors in Akwesasne. We know that Grand Chief Abram Benedict and Mohawk Council declared an emergency in response, but simply to be prepared. Grand Chief has confirmed to me that he is in touch very closely with the federal government to determine how that's going to work for his community. His messaging is people need to be staying home, buying only what they need, staying connected to their neighbors. But they will be able to come into Cornwall back and forth for shopping and healthcare. So that is to be considered essential travel into Cornwall. And he wants to make sure that the people in Akwesasne, you know, are not going to have any trouble with that piece. He's also in touch with the American side and American counterparts to make sure that the entire territory has some, you know, consistency around that. The Prime Minister acknowledged today that they're going to harness the power of our industries in Canada. So there needs to be potentially some production of equipment, and so they're going to try and harness all that energy in the private sector to focus on that. So those are the messages that we've heard provincially and federally, and I wanted to just highlight those things before we move into our next discussion. I'm going to turn things over to the CAO. I can tell you that we meet regularly every day. All managers meet. So at the top of the day, there is a review of everything that is going on at the city, and there really is pretty much hourly checking in on the situation. So you can feel secure in the role that city administration is playing in terms of managing this. It's been quite astounding to see them come together to communicate so effectively. And so I continue to feel great confidence in them. Now, I think the CAO will address you now to maybe move a certain item up on the agenda to allow for Councillor Bergeron to be able to actually participate and vote in our discussion. So I'm now going to turn it over to the CAO, and I'll make further comments at the end of this meeting as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So I wanted to, if council was in agreement, I wanted to recommend that we move 6.2, the bylaw 2020-52, the amendment to the procedural bylaw, move that up as the first item that we deal with on the agenda this afternoon.
So I'm going to need a motion to adopt the agenda as amended, or discussion around that. Councillor Towndale.
Madam Mayor, well, I'll move to amend the agenda
Right.
that way, to move that item first.
Okay. Councillor Bennett.
Second.
Okay. Everybody in favor of that amendment? Thank you. Carried. Now we'll need a motion to adopt the agenda as amended. Councillor Hébert and Councillor Gardner, any discussion? All in favor? Carried. Any disclosure of interest? Councillor Towndale.
Madam Mayor, when it comes to property taxes, I spoke with the clerk about this. I'm a silent partner in a business in town, but because this is a blanket measure, similar to passing the tax rate, I don't believe it's a conflict of interest, but I was advised that I should mention this.
That's fair. Anybody else on disclosure of interest? All right, I need a motion to go into committee of the whole. Councillor McDonald, Councillor Duppel, any discussion? All in favor? Carried. Presentations and reports. Madam Clerk?
I think we want to pass bylaw 52 first, which is the amendment to the procedural bylaw to allow for electronic participation.
Thank you. I'll go back to Madam CAO for comments before we discuss.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So we're bringing the bylaw forward. There was legislation that was passed yesterday in the province of Ontario to allow further electronic participation of council via open and closed meetings, and that electronic participation can count as quorum. So prior to that, although there might have been the opportunity to set up electronic participation, those councillors or elected officials that were participating electronically could not count as quorum. Quorum had to be physically present in the location. So there was an amendment made yesterday through the province, understanding that we're trying to do social distancing, that people might be need to self-isolate or self-quarantine. And so these are matters that I think were not anticipated originally when we were talking about electronic participation. So those changes have been made by the province. In order to do that, though, the city still has to pass a bylaw to allow electronic participation. And then the bylaw was actually prepared a couple of days ago, so I would like to take council to, and I'm going to read this section, if you just bear with me for a minute. So if we look at 1A, a member of council or a committee of council or local board can
Page 4.
Yeah, page 4, thank you. Can participate electronically in a meeting which is open to the public regarding emergencies and matters critical to community welfare. And then B says, any such member shall not be counted towards quorum of members present at any point in time and shall not be able to vote unless permitted by the Municipal Act. So the changes that were made yesterday will allow, for this instance, people that are participating electronically to count towards quorum of the members. So that was just something that I wanted to highlight for council's consideration this afternoon. And so the bylaw is presented, and our recommendation is that council consider adopting the bylaw.
Thank you. So, do we have a motion, mover and a seconder? Councillor Towndale, seconded by Councillor.
Talk about to make the amendment according to what the province just put forward.
To move this bylaw forward.
Are we not making the changes now that the provinces are, why not do it all at once?
Right. Madam,
Through you,
Madam
Madam
Mayor.
Mayor, because we have we have in here, as permitted by the Municipal Act, any changes, it's meant to allow any changes that are made by the province of the Municipal Act will automatically be governed by this bylaw. So if there are certain exceptional circumstances, we have that in here to allow council to be able to enact without having to change a bylaw.
Okay, I see that, thank you.
So Councillor Towndale still moves that bylaw. Is there a seconder for that? Councillor Grant? Debate. Councillor
The
McIntosh.
word "can participate," does that mean you could, we still have this set up here, and if you want to come down, you can, or if you want to stay home, you can?
Yes, we anticipated that. We're talking about that. Madam CAO.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So excellent question, because there is going to be, so there's a requirement to make sure that the meeting is open to the public. And so we have dealt with, and there have been discussions, there have been many conference calls that have occurred this week throughout organizations, public sector, province, and there starts to be difficulty trying to contain the volumes of people on those calls, the ability to participate, the ability to, so in this mechanism today, this works. I'm not sure that we have a plan in place right now. If we had to everybody call into a call, we do not have a mechanism in place right now that would allow the entire community, if we had hundreds of people that wanted to call in or participate on that call. So what we would likely recommend for the short term is that we continue to have meetings via webcast, and those that can attend or are comfortable attending do so. And then we still have the conference call equipment here, but we're still able to do it webcasting, so people can still watch and still hopefully listen to the, and we'll try to make sure if people can't hear today, what we'll do is we'll try to make sure maybe we get a microphone close to the conference console so that people can properly hear.
I feel more comfortable coming in here than talking a mile away, especially when you get into a debate.
Right, and I think, to your point, Councillor McIntosh, we might have some councillors that might be quarantined or might need to have to isolate themselves. So there might be, and then able to participate at a later date. So this just allows everybody to be part of that discussion.
Question answered.
Thank you. Comments, questions? So then technically, the minimum requirement would be to have one person here with the clerk or CAO, and everybody then could call in, because then people could access the webcast and also listen in. Okay? But anybody who wants to participate, as long as we're doing the social distancing as we're doing now, that's appropriate. So all in favor? Carried. Thank you. Next item, Madam Clerk.
So now we have bylaws 51, 53, and 54 inclusive listed on the agenda. We're asking for those to be taken as read and passed.
So I'll turn to Madam CAO for introduction.
Certainly, thank you, Madam Mayor. So I have been in contact with some other municipalities and some of the steps that they are taking. Part of the benefit of consideration for delegation of authority to the CAO will allow us to continue to move business items, specifically in the areas of tendering and procurement, if we have regular ongoing business matters that were planned and budgeted for, then to continue to allow those items to move through. I would describe, some of the authority provided in this bylaw similar to a situation when we approach election period and you might have a lame duck council. It's to allow the business to continue to proceed. It would also allow the ability for the CAO to deal with certain smaller land transactions. So I'd like to assure council, I'm not going to deal with any new development, but when we have small pieces of land that we routinely deal with on smaller property items, those are the items that we can continue to allow to move through. The reason why the $150,000 is identified is because up to $150,000 is my authority currently, so it would be anything in excess of that. And it's specific to the municipality's ability to manage matters during this COVID-19 matter, right? So the bylaw stipulates that. It doesn't stipulate an end date, but we will put an end date to it at some point in time when we feel that it's no longer required. or we'll bring that matter back.
Somebody to move that?
I just want to ask a question first
Okay.
before I,
Can we have a mover? Counselor Gardner, seconded by Counselor DePel. Counselor Grant and then Counselor Gardner.
thank you, Madam Mayor. The number one, that the chief administrative officer be delegated the authority. Should we not have or designate, because if something happens to Maureen, God forbid, but I mean, if she gets sick, she can't do her duties, and then we have to meet again to make this amendment. So I think we should have that language in there. It expedites and makes things more efficient.
Madam CEO?
Through you, Madam Mayor, so I didn't actually think of that when we were looking at the bylaw. And as council knows, if I'm going to be away from the office for a period of time, I usually appoint an acting CAO. So I think if council would like to put or designate, I think that's an amendment that could be considered. And if council wants to do that, then
I'll move that amendment, if I can get a seconder.
Sure. Counselor McIntosh seconds. Any debate on that? All in favor? Carried. So we're discussing the bylaw as amended.
Just one other.
Go ahead, Counselor Grant.
And C, if you talk, this to cover COVID-19 and/or flooding, is there a reason that's flooding is in there? It's
Right, Madam CEO?
through you, Madam Mayor, I think that during this time of year now, I'm not anticipating our region is going to be affected by flooding, but it's possible. We're heading into this cycle in the next 6 or 8 weeks. I know some other municipalities in Eastern Ontario are taking the same approach, so I don't anticipate flooding within our community, but it's just to allow coverage at this time.
okay, all right. Thank you.
I then have Counselor Gardner and then Counselor Towndale.
My question is, I agree with the motion, but, and actually was talking to the CAO when I first came in. And my question is, how do we get the feedback, or will whatever decisions are made, will council get feedback from administration?
Madam CEO?
So through you, Madam Mayor, yes, I would recommend that, first of all, I will provide updates to council regularly, but I do believe as well that we should actually bring back when we get back to public meetings, we'll actually bring back a report in a public meeting to identify the things that I have enacted on behalf of council with this delegation of authority. And
Well,
so
we're gonna have
that's
some-
an item E, right, to kind of bring it back.
We're gonna have some busy agendas going forward, we're able to meet, so if we even have to look at a special meeting in order to bring that the information forward that you might wanna give us and not fit it into an agenda, because our agendas are gonna be pretty thick going back.
Any response to that, Madam CEO?
We could put an item on a consent agenda, for example. Like I could provide something that's on a consent agenda. It's for council to receive, and it would just provide all of that information. If council had questions, they could pull it out, but at least it's there for the public to see as well.
Thank you.
I have
Point of
Counselor
some-
Towndale.
Point of
Order?
order, I thank you. Someone who's watching from home is asking that our colleagues speak into the mic because they can't quite hear us.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yes.
Counselor Gardner. Thank you for that. I have Counselor Towndale next.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So we're moving all these together as one, is that correct, bylaws?
Madam CEO?
Well, Councillor Grant has moved for an amendment to this particular bylaw. So I don't know if we need to, we could do them individually if council would prefer.
No, I'm just asking for,
Clarity.
clarity. So, because I wanted to ask a question about, item number 5, or is that not part of this right now?
So the mover and seconder were, Madam Clerk,
Councillors Gardner and Dupel,
and they were moving all
all three.
Are
Sorry,
you?
so the item 6.5 on the agenda,
I have
That-
different numbers in front of me, I'm sorry. Deferral of property costs?
so that's not a bylaw, that's not part of this motion, so
Okay.
we'll deal with that one separately.
Okay,
Right.
I'll save my remarks for that.
Okay. Any further discussion on this? Counselor
Councillor Bergeron?
Bergeron, yes. But Councillor Bergeron, you will let us know when you want to speak, right?
Yes, I will.
Thank you. Okay, any further comment? All in favor? Carried. Thank you. Yes, we'll have to figure out how that works. I'll have to make sure, especially if we have more and more people on the line, I'll have to make sure that we maybe get the clerk's assistance in managing how we vote so that we get everybody. Thank you. Next item, Madam Clerk?
Deferral of property tax collection with a recommendation that council approve changing the 2020 interim levy installment dates from March 31st and April 30th to May 15th and June 15th respectively, and postponing interest charges to June 16th.
Moved by Councillor Hébert, seconded by Councillor Towndale. Debate. Councillor Towndale.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just had a question. Is this enough time? Because right now, a lot of businesses are closed in the city, either by order or voluntarily, so revenues are down. And it's gonna take time for them to get those revenues back up. You know, it's not as if, let's say this ends at the end of March, we're lucky, fingers crossed. I don't think that's very likely, but this is just hypothetical right now. It's still gonna take time for things to return to normal, a routine to come back, and it's gonna take time for businesses, and residents for that matter, to return to work and kind of get back to where they are. So I'm just curious to know if this is a bit like a far enough time frame to
Mhm.
provide relief.
Mhm. Madam CAO?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So by deferring, so the first deferral date would go from March 31st to May 15th, so that still provides 6 weeks. We have seen other municipalities provide about 30 days, so we're providing 45. I think that what it also would allow is that if circumstances deem that council would like to have it renewed or reviewed, we could take a look at it again within a period of time of May 15th or June 15th if council wanted to revisit that decision. But we're proposing this now. It is actually a little bit, I think it's a little bit longer, the deferral period, than what we've seen. And then we have not seen some other municipalities postpone or not have any interest charges during that period, but this is part of our recommendation as well. And
Thank you.
I have Councillor Hébert and then Councillor Dupel.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. My question was answered. I thought maybe if the situation were to last longer, we could just reassess as we go.
Mhm. Bear in mind that this report, so the Chamber of Commerce and Residents approached us right away, and administration, meaning mostly Madam CAO and Madam CFO, have been working on this for a couple of days now. So even in a couple of days, the situation changes. Right. Councillor Dupel and then Councillor McIntosh.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So I just have a question, because one of the businesses that I've been in communication with said that they were asking for their April 1st payment to be put to the end of their tax, which would be October. So does this mean the one that was due for April 1st is now going to be due for May 15?
Madam CAO?
yes, so through you, Madam Mayor, yeah, so actually the payment is due on March 31st, and it would be due now on May 15th.
And does that take into consideration the businesses that are on like automated, like an automated withdrawal monthly?
So through you, Madam Mayor.
Yes, go ahead. We anticipated that question too.
So we have, and actually, I should also say, we have a media release ready to issue following this meeting too, if council adopts the recommendation. Businesses and property owners, residential property owners, people that are on a pre-authorized payment, they will have to notify the city to be removed from, so that we take them off of pre-authorized payment if they want to not proceed in that manner. So that is something that we will need the property owner to initiate with the city. As far as installment due dates go, the delay in the people that pay by there's 4 installments in a year, so this installment due date has just been pushed out. But anybody that's on pre-authorized payment, in that communication, will instruct them to send an email, contact the Financial Services Department, and we will take them off of pre-authorized payment.
And so when will that make their payment, when will that defer their payment to?
that'll require a conversation with financial services so that they understand when they want their payments either started up again, or if
Okay.
they want to go on to the installment mechanism. So quite often, people choose pre-authorized payment because it's a very good cash flow management tool to pay it equally over 10 installments as opposed to much larger quarterly installments. So that's a conversation that the property owner should have directly with the financial services department, would be my recommendation.
Okay. And just my other question was, I didn't know what other municipalities' timeframes were. I was wondering the same as Councillor Cowendale, if it was long enough, so. We're talking about businesses that have gone from full-fledged business to
Right,
shutting the doors.
right. Just going back to your point, Madam CEO, those details that Councillor DePel raised, those will be addressed in the press release if this is passed,
Correct,
in terms of how to do that.
correct.
I have Councillor McIntosh and then Councillor McDonald.
Um,
Councillor Mac?
As a part owner of a small business, I know what's going on. The chamber didn't specify whether the landlord they surveyed or was the business owner, because many times the guy running the business doesn't own the building. He just pays rent. So he's shut down. So we're deferring the property taxes. I guess the trick would be, does the landlord give the business owner a break on the rent? Because if I'm shutting down my business, and it could be 2 months, 3 months, I have no revenue coming in. So suddenly I'm looking at a bill, if I own both. In October, I'm looking at a double bill. I don't have any money.
Madam CEO?
Through you, Madam Mayor, in my conversations with the chamber, they're anticipating that some tenants are not going to be able to make some of their rent payments. And so this is also part of the reason why there is an ask of a deferral of taxes, because people might be a little bit slower in paying rent depending on what their personal situation is.
I guess the point I'm trying to make, if you own the building, you're not, and your tenant is still paying the rent, you still have the income. The trick is, if the tenant suddenly says, I don't have any money, that's where the deferral comes in. Also, would this apply to businesses that are still operating full tilt? A smart businessman would say, I'm paying $80,000 a year in taxes, I'll just bank the money till next year, I'll pay you then.
Madam
Through you,
CEO?
Madam Mayor, this will apply to all property owners.
Councillor McDonald?
I think the CAO rather answered my question. I was going to ask what the acronym PAP stood for, but I think I heard the phrase pre-authorized payment about
Right.
10 times there, so thank you very much. So
Help.
obviously it means that if you're on pre-authorized, you're there unless you make a call. Thank you.
Thank you. Second round, or anybody else on the first round? Councillor Gardner?
Dealing with the same thing we're talking about here, there's billions of dollars in federal money and provincial money that's going to come forward. How does that fit in with what we're talking about now? I mean, businesses that are in trouble, like one thing I heard was that they would get $25,000. How does that help them? And, or is that money available, and when is it gonna be available?
Madam CEO?
Through you, Madam Mayor, so I'm not sure that we have all of the details of all of the programs that are coming out that are going to support individuals and businesses that are affected by whether it's layoffs or having to quarantine or businesses that have had to close. I think what we're trying to do from a property tax point of view, we're just trying to alleviate anybody from having to make a payment in a short period of time, understanding that some of this might take longer to figure out, and also to waive interest charges in the interim for people that are in those situations.
Because there's also employees that are gonna lose their job, and can they tap into that money? Some will be laid off, can they tap into that money? Do they have to go to UIC? I mean, those are questions I'd like to answered from the feds or the province, because I don't want people double dipping. Not fair to say that, but at the end of the day, if they're receiving money from the feds and the province, what about us? Are we helping them to double dip, or the question is gotta be answered?
So there are a lot of different agencies that are analyzing all of these announcements, right? So we're not able yet to answer all of those questions, but I can assure you that a lot of local agencies are working on that. I might want to ask social services for their comment on, you know, whether they're working on analyzing these changes and what kind of information is going to go out to the public.
Through you, Madam Mayor. So we have a provincial association called OMSA, and OMSA has been requested today to make a document including all of the upcoming programs and what the eligibility criteria will be for those programs. So I'm hoping in the coming week or weeks, I don't want to put OMSA on any pressure, but we should have that document that we will make available, and we'll be able to direct people more appropriately during our conversations on our phone line. But we don't have all of the details as of yet either.
Thank you. I have Councillor Towndale and then Councillor Hébert.
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Mr. Towndale.
Sorry, just a couple things. Actually, I just got an email from the Executive Director of the Chamber. Survey included landlords in the DBIA, so that should answer part of that question. One question I had, though, so when we talk about pre-authorized payments, do we know how many people are on that? Because I'd imagine it's quite a few. So to build on this, and the reason why I'm asking this, if we ask them all to email financial services individually or contact financial service individually, that's a big, like, influx of communication and requirements. Would it not be simpler to just do a blanket where we just automatically assume those on pre-authorized payment get the extension as well?
Madam CEO.
Through you, Madam Mayor, there are a significant number of people that are on these pre-authorized payments, but your monthly pre-authorized payment is significantly less than your 4 quarterly installments. So I also am anticipating that many people that are able to manage those monthly payments are gonna want those monthly payments to continue. So we do not have, like, I do not want to start to affect people's monthly payments if they want to stay up, if they want to keep that payment pattern going. We will have to manage, and so part of why it did take us, we're a little bit longer responding to this than some of our smaller municipalities that surround us. Part of why we wanted to approach it in this format is to be able to try and come up with a solution that we think will be able to be managed administratively. So if we do get a lot of calls through financial services, we'll be deploying resources to be able to help deal with that. And it's also why we would like people to email financial services, right? Because it's a much easier mechanism to process rather than trying dealing with people over the telephone.
Okay, I just want to thank you for that. Make sure that somebody, you know, I hope everyone hears about this in terms of how to do it, because I'd hate to see someone get caught because they weren't aware they had to manually react. You know, that could put a financial burden on somebody.
It's correct to highlight the challenges we're having with communications, right? That's crucial at this time. I have Councillor Hébert and then Councillor Dupel.
I think I have one of those questions that doesn't quite have an answer yet.
You can ask, go
yeah.
ahead.
I'm not quite asking, but I'll state it. I know that the Premier has frozen all evictions
Yes.
for the time being, and I don't know if that's just residential, but I'm hoping that also applies to commercial properties as well. So if our businesses are struggling right now, that their property owners don't put them out on the street and that they have a few months to recuperate. And so if we can help those property owners with, you know, a few months with their taxes, then maybe they can forgo the evictions that they would possibly put on those business owners. So anyways, I'm not sure if, I brought up an article thinking maybe if it would include who the eviction notices included, whether it was just residential, for business, commercial properties were included. I'm not sure if that's.
Madam CAO, does anybody have the answer to that?
Yeah, I don't know. If it was just a blanket.
We're still working on that.
Yeah.
And I think that there is going to be a local conversation concerning landlords and tenants. I think it's starting to happen everywhere else, and it'll happen here too. I don't know if OMSA is working on something like that as well. Don't know. Okay. Anything else?
No, that's it.
Okay. Councillor Dupel and then Councillor McIntosh.
Sorry, thank you, Madam Mayor. Just to go back to the question, so we're March 20th today, it's Friday afternoon. So will people have enough time to cancel that pre-authorized for March 31st?
Madam CAO?
So through you, Madam Mayor, so I'm gonna redirect that question to Mrs. Bailey, because some of the pre-authorized payments don't necessarily line up with installment dates. So I'm gonna have Mrs. Bailey answer that question.
Madam CFO?
Through you, Madam Mayor, pre-authorized payments happen the first of the month and 15th of the month. So if they're the first of the month, we'll answer those inquiries first, hopefully through email and telephone if necessary. And the ones that are coming in that are due on the 15th of the month, then we will manage those second.
Okay. Thank you.
Councillor McIntosh?
Does this cover water and sewer payments too?
Madam
Or just
CAO?
property taxes?
Madam CAO?
So through you, Madam Mayor, we're not going to defer water and wastewater payments, sewer payments, but will not charge interest on any delinquent payments either.
Definitely help. It's not gonna solve the whole problem. I know our business down 85% next week will be 100%. And you still have to pay your lights and heat and all the other things that go with running a building. So there's definitely gonna be some people who are gonna really be in trouble when they don't have any cash flow coming in. It's, when it comes to commercial evictions, it's a little different than residential evictions. Usually commercial, what happens is somebody just goes under and, you know, they're not paying for supplies and whatnot. I never really heard of a commercial eviction where the landlord kicks the guy out. Usually it's the other, you know, somebody files judgment and that goes from there.
Good to know, never owned a business.
Anyway, it's, I wouldn't want to be trying to run a restaurant with, you know, having to pay bills and no income coming in. It's a tough go, it is a tough go. And I think this is the least we can do. I think we're going to be back here when the fall installments come in for people. This is real serious. This is beyond serious when it comes to businesses, small businesses.
Yep.
It's really a tough go.
Any other comments? Councillor Gardner?
In general, how is it going to affect our budget, number one?
Mike?
Sorry. How is it going to affect our budget as we go forward? In general, in terms I'm asking. And how is it going to affect the interest for the Benson Center and the loans that we have? Outstanding loans we have. I mean, what kind of effect is it going to have? Let's say on the interest is on the province progress fund is paying for the Benson Center. What happens there?
Madam CAO?
Yeah, I'm gonna direct it to Mrs.
The interest
Bailey.
rates are they're not through the roof anymore.
So we'll go to Madam CFO.
The floor.
For you, Madam Mayor, first part of your question, we've done some preliminary estimates on interest revenue that we would normally collect on our investments, and we probably will be down based on the fact right now that we're earning probably a point percentage less than we had budgeted, so it could be a couple of $100,000 depending on where or how long this goes. As far as the revenue that we take in for interest in arrears for taxes and water, because we are not collecting those for two months, it's probably going to be about $100,000 to $150,000 depending on the whoever takes us up.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Councillor Mack, did you?
I want to pick up on what Councillor
ahead.
Gardner's talked about. I
Go
know
ahead.
it's beyond the property tax thing, but when it comes to revenue, are we still handing out parking tickets, things like that, or does that department
Madam CAO?
check
So
that?
through you, Madam Mayor, there are some small items from a revenue perspective that we are not concerning ourselves with right now. So on the parking side, are we ticketing people, you know, potentially that haven't been paying for their parking on the side of the road? Likely not. But if somebody is parking in a zone that is blocking fire, or if it's in a handicap spot, there are going to be other parking violations that we will enforce. But when it comes to the smaller items, it's not our focus right now. Our focus is trying to
Yeah.
be able to respond to what is occurring in the community.
Understand, but thought goes through my mind, like, sources of revenue have really shut down,
Mhm.
like Benson Center, one.
So through you,
Aquatic
Madam,
Center.
yeah, through you, Madam Mayor, absolutely. So there is going to be a revenue impact to the municipality. It's too early right now to understand what that might be. It depends on the duration, and this might go on for, an extended period of time. We did announce that we're keeping our facilities closed, consistent with the school closures right now. So that will remain closed until, I believe it's April the 6th, or the end of day, April the 5th. That'll likely be revisited. And anybody that has, if they've paid for access to the facilities, there are going to be full refunds provided to people. So we're not, we're gonna give full consideration to those.
Here's a question I've been asked by a couple of people, small business people. We've laid off our staff. We've got people that were minimum wage who aren't being paid. We're taking a big hit. The furloughs is very nice, but we still got to pay the tax bill at the end of the day. What's the city doing to cut their expenses?
Madam CEO?
So through you, Madam Mayor, I think still we're relatively early in understanding exactly what other types of programs are available federally and provincially. There is some provincial funding that we anticipate is going to be made available for the municipality when it comes to paramedic services, our home for the aged, some of the preemptive work that we have to do for COVID-19. I think it's early to try and ascertain, although by the same token, you can also see that we have been scaling back our operations. So from a budgetary perspective, it's early to try and understand how that's going to affect us at the end of the year. Although we might have some revenue that we'll forego, there might be some costs that we're foregoing too, because we're not moving forward with certain items and certain projects.
Have we looked at, through you to CFO, we have a worst-case scenario? We sat down and thought, I know it's early in the game, and a lot of, this thing changes by the day, but has anybody sat down and said, woo, this could be ugly?
Through you, Madam Mayor,
Madam
it
CFO.
is early to put a number on that right now, but every department is monitoring their revenue and their expenses and reporting to the CAO and to myself.
8 days ago, I didn't think this was a big issue. Now, boy, it's changed so much and so fast.
Right. Any other comments? So, before I call the vote, I'll just add a few things. I'm sensing that we're going to move forward with this, so I think it's a very good thing. I can assure you that the city is, and city staff are hyper-focused on this. Not focused so much on revenue, but focused on what needs to be done to keep things going, because people still need water and garbage and recycling and all of those things. So there's a hyper-focus on making sure that the city is running. The telephone line, it's interesting, the one that's been set up through social services. You know, the questions are around small business, but they're also still around symptoms and COVID-19 related symptoms. So we're still very much early days, and people are still trying to figure out how they're personally going to be able to protect themselves and their families. On the issue of money and tax deferrals and payments, I want to remind people that we are interconnected here. So tenants are connected to landlords, and landlords are connected to tenants, and small businesses are connected to clients, and vice versa. So any impact one side is feeling, the other side is going to feel it as well. What's trending now is social isolation has to come with social solidarity. So that's where we are. And so all of these discussions have two sides, but we're connected at the end of the day. So I'm going to call the vote on this. All in favor? Carried.
In favor.
Thank you, Councillor Bergeron. Still getting used to not seeing your face and having to remember that you're there by telephone.
Can I ask for a clarification?
Go ahead, Councillor McAdoo.
You mentioned that Akwesasne has declared a state of emergency, and Brantford and Brant County have declared a state of emergency. What's that do for them?
Right, so I'm going to address that in a moment. So, this has been carried, so we're good there. I did want to thank Councillor Grant for bringing up the designate topic. I think we have had conversations internally about how to manage if one of us, one of the senior manager team gets sick. So we've had those conversations. So thank you for reminding us, Councillor Grant, that we needed to put that in the bylaw per se. Because, Madam CEO, do you have a comment about leadership team, senior leadership team, and backup plans?
Well, we've had an awful lot of conversations. So we started our calls and our EOC. We call it really, it's our emergency operation kind of command center. We set that up about a week ago. We've been having ongoing daily calls, and as we go through those calls, we go through departments and we look for assessment with respect to how our operations are running, how we have managed to have some of our staff work remotely. We have had rotations of some staff, so we want to make sure in our core essential services we have proper rotation in place, understanding that there's the possibility that people might be subject to not being able to come in, whether it's because of quarantine, illness, and we know that we are also anticipating that this is likely something that's going to carry on for a much longer period of time than just the next 2 weeks. So it has been a fairly big week. We're also looking at business continuity, who are our alternate resources in the case of somebody that might become out of commission because of illness. So we'll use, for example, in our call this morning, as an example, we had mentioned if Emma Meldrum is fallen ill and is not able to do her function.
We clone
what
her,
is-
sorry.
What is going to be our backup plan, right? So we need to make sure that we have other city resources available that can help step in and make sure that we're still getting those communications posted on our website. So we're working on those items as well, so I'm not sure if that sort of answers the question, but these are the things we're working through currently.
Right. You know, human resources has been quite central to our discussions. A focus of attention has been on Glenstour-Dunn Lodge, making sure that that place is operational. I don't know, Madam CFO, CAO, if you want to talk about Glenstour-Dunn Lodge in particular, because that's a focus of concern for people in the community.
So I'd like to speak, I would like to speak on that. Very appreciative of an opportunity that we've had. So we've had some of our unionized staff in the recreation area that are not being utilized right now because of the closure of our facilities. But the Glenstour-Dunn Lodge does have a lot of individuals that are off right now and people that are returning from vacation that are going to have to quarantine for 14 days. So what we've done is we've redeployed some of our 234 employees down to the Glenstour-Dunn Lodge, and they're able to help with laundry and maintenance and help be able to run around and do things that take other things away from the staff at the lodge so they can focus their care on the residents. We're also going to be using some of these resources for Meals on Wheels and delivery. So I'm not sure if Mr. Donig would like to add some comments, but I think we feel, and Mr. Golden is not with us today, but the feedback that I've been receiving is that it's been well received at the Glenstour-Dunn Lodge, and I think that the employees that have gone down to assist in those efforts should be commended, and I think that they have responded positively as well. We initiated training yesterday, but we're anticipating that this is something we're going to have to continue to do, and also understand that those residents, it is their home. They are going to be somewhat isolated as well because there's restrictions in place that their family members can't get in to visit them. So that, I think, has been a success of this week. We're hoping that as a bigger organization, we can redeploy our resources where we need to alleviate any strain in other areas. So that was a success this week.
Thank you. Did Mr. Donig want to add anything?
Through you, Madam Chair, I actually don't unless there's any specific questions. We took 12 QP 234 employees, one paramedic, that are reassigned down there. We've put a 3.5-week schedule in place for now to get Glen Storen Lodge through this. And we'll see where we go from there.
Still putting up fires.
Thank you, Mr. Donor. Councillor Grant?
Have the iPads worked, or have they, they're implementing
Yeah.
iPads for connection?
Madam CEO?
So through you, Madam Mayor, I don't have an answer on that. We can try and get you some feedback. But that was a really nice donation to the lodge to hopefully allow residents to be able to do some FaceTime or some type of other communication with family members.
There's some really good news, sort of heartwarming stories that are taking place. It would be good to sort of harness all that and put it out there for your information. Just to go back on the small business, because that's been a focus of worry for our community. The Chamber is putting together a list of resources for people. So the Chamber really wants small business to reach out and not to feel isolated during this period of time, that they're putting together a list of resources. I know the Social Development Council is also putting together a list of resources. So I think community agencies are coming together, and the city is trying to see how we can, help that process or help jump into that conversation as well if we can. There's a lot of collaboration that's taking place from what I've been able to observe. On the issue of a declaration of emergency, so that is a decision that rests with the head of council. You may have heard that several municipalities in Ontario have already done so, including the Mohawk Council of Akwesasne. Most of those municipalities right now at this point are smaller, because a declaration of emergency tends to be around whether a city has capacity in terms of resources to adapt and react to the situation. So in Cornwall at this time, we have the resources. We have the human resources, we have the capital to be able to respond appropriately and to continue to provide services. So we're not in the same category as a smaller municipality. However, I will say this is something that can be done quickly. We have ascertained exactly how that can take place. We have the paperwork ready to go. We have obtained opinions on situations that would warrant this. So this is a decision that can be made quickly, and we are keeping an eye on this on an hourly basis. The other thing that you need to know is that we're watching the Eastern Ontario Health Unit. Dr. Paul also has that capacity, and spoke to him this morning, and he's not in that place yet to declare an emergency. So the other thing you need to know is Dr. Paul, I can text him and call him, and he's responsive very, very quickly. So right now, we're keeping an eye on that. And we're sort of taking it hour by hour, day by day, but we are ready to do that should that become necessary. I'm going to stay in close contact with administration, because it will depend on their recommendation around whether we're in a situation where, as a municipality, we don't have the resources to respond. Right now, we're not in that place, but that does mean that the CAO and myself have to be pretty much in constant contact. And so that is what's been taking place. So I did want to make those comments around that and let you know that that's how we're moving forward right now. Councillor McIntosh?
That's a good point. I was wondering, Brantford, which has 105,000 people, they had 18 suspected cases overnight. That's why they declared the state of emergency.
Right. So that leads me to comment on the fact that we are waiting for our local assessment center, right? So Dr. Paul is working on setting all of those up for the region next week, and we're being told next week this is gonna happen for us. Securing a location, that's pretty much being nailed down right now, and Dr. Paul is working on staffing all of those assessment centers. So, Councillor McIntosh, to your point, once an assessment center is set up, yes, we'll have more testing and probably more information in terms of what's happening locally.
Can I have one more question?
Yes, you can have
We had
all the questions you
We had a
want.
provincial state of emergency, and the Premier asked that all bars and restaurants and
Yes?
places be closed, and we had a case in Cornwall, and actually Premier Ford had actually commented on it, that it stayed open, but nobody knew on Saturday night whose jurisdiction it was, so the place stayed open. I understand that has been cleaned up since then. Now,
It-
we now know the police department can
Yes.
close the place up. Is that true?
So Chief Aikman and Deputy Chief Spowert are on top of all of this. They did require some clarity because that declaration of emergency happened on St. Patrick's Day, and it was that evening that that happened. But there is complete clarity now, and the police are on top of this. We spoke directly to Chief Aikman, and he confirmed that. So that did bring about a lot of community upset because people are looking to be respectful of these orders. People are looking to be respectful of social distancing and social isolation. And so when they see that somebody's not doing that, there's concern. And I think that's okay. And I can assure you that police have been extremely responsive to that and are on top of that situation. Councillor Grant.
And the chief has already kept our board aware of it as well, so we're fully aware of everything that's happening.
Thank you. That's correct. Chief Aikman is in touch with, certainly directly with Councillor Grant as chair of the Police Services Board, but also directly to the community. Chief Aikman also has communications at his disposal and will be doing communications for the public if that has not already been done. So that's going to take place as well. Councillor Gardner.
Just to the assessment centers, Dr. Paul was on Cogeco and related some of the information to me. The assessment centers won't be in the hospitals. They'll be close by the hospitals, likely in our health unit offices, because each one of them is close to Winchester, Cornwall Hospital, Alexandria Hospital. So there's a chance that they'll all be close to a hospital, but they want people to stay away from the hospital and use those assessment centers.
Right. This is to avoid hospital surge. In Cornwall, the Eastern Ontario Health Unit location will not be able to house an assessment centre, so
Close
that
to the hospital.
it's going to be accessible to the hospital as best as possible. Any other comments or concerns? Councillor McDonald.
Motion to adjourn.
Pardon?
Sorry. You asked for, I just made the motion to adjourn because nobody responded to your invitation to have further comments.
Okay.
So, motion to adjourn then.
Right. I just wanted to check for sure that there were no other questions or comments.
There was one other comment.
Go ahead.
And people can think whatever they want of it, but our administration has been phenomenal through this. I feel
Into the mic, Councillor Gardner.
I feel that our council has come together with this. There's no fray. Everybody understands what's going on and they care about what's going on. So thanks to everybody, and that's within earshot for everything you do.
Thank you, Councillor Gardner. That is true. Administration has been great, but council has also been quite unified in terms of the messaging. You've been very supportive of us coming together, us doing things electronically, and we'll keep you informed going forward.
I
Councillor
I
McIntosh.
thought John King on CNN put it nicely. This is something that's taken us apart but brought us closer together. Paradoxical.
Yeah, absolutely. There are a lot of good stories out there, and a lot of cities are doing interesting things, and we'll keep you in touch with that. And I might also invite you all to participate on some Facebook Live in the future as well, individually. Have you check in and let me know how you're doing and what you're doing in your, with your families and your constituencies to
Just listening
stay
to my wife.
Yeah, so we'd like to hear about that.
No, that's fine.
All right.
Too many examples.
Thank you for being here. It's good to see you. So I will call for a motion to adjourn. Councillor McDonald, seconded by Councillor Hébert. All in favor? Merci beaucoup. Stay safe.
Bye, Eric.
Merci, conseiller Bergeron. Whoa. Are the mics on? Not yet?